All right. Good is it morning? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We are so grateful that you all are here to share this space with us today. We are going to have an awesome panel. Today, we are going to be talking about from the pipeline to power, HBCU leadership development and K-12 systems. And we have a super power pack panel lined up for you all. I will start by introducing myself as the moderator, and then I'll give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. And then we're going to jump into some questions, and we will attempt, because I think we're going to have some great dialogue, but we're going to attempt to save some room for questions from our guests. So if you do have some questions, drop them in the chat. And if we're able, we will be able to answer a couple of them. We will be starting on time and ending on time. So again, we're going to have a great dialogue. And so we look forward to hearing from our guests. I am Dr. Courtney Wilkerson. I am a school principal in Washington, D.C. I've been a school leader since 2012. I've been in education since 2001. I am a native Washingtonian, so to be able to serve and lead a school in the community in which I was born and raised not only allows me to have extreme pride in what I do, but to really enhance the relationship, the responsibility, and the resistance that I empower all of us to have against anything that's anti-Black culture. We stand for the power and the pride of our Black and brown children, which means we must stand for the power and the pride of our Black educators, teachers, leaders, and all those who serve Black children. I got my doctorate at Howard University at HU, and immediately transitioned into adjunct faculty there, where I was able to continue to pour into not only my peers, but also to be in community with who used to be professors, now colleagues, just to continue that work, right? And that connection between our higher ed and our K-12 to me is extremely important because we live as research practitioners, and that's what I do every single day. So I'm going to pass the mic in good pass the mic fashion. I'm going to actually start with who I've known the longest, Dr. Gregory Hutchings. We go way back. And as far back as I can think of, one thing is we've always cared about Black kids, Black people, and Black leaders. And so I'm going to start with him and his introduction, and then he's going to pass the mic to the next panelist.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wilkerson. Yes, we've known each other since college. College days swiftly pass. So I just want to say I am excited to be here today. I'm an assistant professor and EDD coordinator with the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department here at Howard University. I'm a former superintendent in two states, Ohio and Virginia. And I also am the founder and CEO of two organizations or two businesses. One is Revolutionary Ed, which focuses on anti-racism practices in education, and the other is Hutchings and Associates, where we do strategic planning, executive coaching, school board relations, professional learning, and the list goes on and on, whatever folks need. But I'm inspired, one, to be here and to be a part of Howard. This is my third year, ending my third year as an assistant professor. And one tidbit that you might not know is that I always told myself that when I left the superintendency, I was going to be a professor at Howard University, where my father graduated from, and it came to fruition. So I am grateful to be a part of the Mecca and looking forward to our discussion today. I'm gonna pass it on to my sister, and that melanin is popping, Dr. Shannon Waite. Read them banned books.
Your book banned, Dr.
It
Hutchins?
is, so read it.
Good. So read the banned books. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Shannon Waite, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. I'm the master's coordinator. I am a PI on the ECPI grant, which is funded by Wallace in partnership with DCPS. I am also a former school board leader. In New York City, it was called the Panel for Educational Policy. I was a mayoral appointee to the board, and that also made me a trustee for the fifth largest retirement system in New York City. I am also a consultant with Hazard Young and Atia, HYA, which is an executive search firm, and I too have my own S Corp. It is SR Waite Consultants. SR Waite Consulting, and I just do the work of developing critical consciousness in educational leaders and in organizational leaders who are serious about committing to interrupting the pathologies of white supremacy and racism within education and within their organizations. Thank you. I am going to pass the mic to Dr. Pringle.
Hey everybody. Um, I'm Eugene Pringle. Just a pleasure and an honor to be here today. I am currently a senior professorial lecturer and the associate director of the Education Policy and Leadership Program at the American University. However, I'm an HBCU kid, tried and true. I'm a graduate of Bethune-Cookman University, founded by Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune in 1904, with five little girls, $1.50, and faith in God. Yes, that is the tag. But prior to coming to American, I actually started my career in higher education at Bethune-Cookman University. Full circle moment for me where I was able to go back and be an assistant professor and ultimately lead as the director of the School of Education at Bethune-Cookman before coming to American University. But my stint in education is one that I would classify as short but pretty robust. So started as an English teacher. I've served in the capacity of literacy instructional coach. At the time when the College Board was implementing the Springboard program, I was doing training in Orange County Public Schools to orient individuals to that before moving into school leadership in Orange County Public Schools. So just excited to be here. Right now, this space is one that is near and dear to me. Having crossed all sectors of education, I would consider K-12, nonprofit, and higher education. I've been able to come to this space with an equity lens, which when I think about my research and what I do, it is informed by teacher preparation and how that has been used historically as social activism and social action as a liberatory practice for Black and Brown students and racially minoritized communities. So just really happy to be here today to talk about some of these issues of pipeline and leadership pipeline that's impacting, but has also perpetuated in a very positive way Black communities.
Well, I mean, I feel like the introductions is kind of like, all right, any questions? Because what you all just provided for us is just a really a good picture about the wisdom and the knowledge and experience that is going to come forth in this conversation. And again, welcome to everybody who's just joining us today in our Power to Pipeline to Power. We're going to really think about what is it like to develop pathways of K-12 and K-12 system, in the role of HBCUs in cultivating a robust pipeline of educational leaders. We're going to think a lot about the relationship and the alignment between leadership preparation, institutional partnerships, and of course, the workforce development and advancing educational equity. And we have three questions that we're going to start with. But again, as things come up and arise for us as part of this panel, I want to invite my panelists to please, make this a dialogue, to chime in, to add on, to challenge, right? All of those different things, because as we have heard, we all bring a very unique lens to this conversation, and each lens then adds to the power that we're going to elevate in this conversation. So the very first question is going to be, how can HBCUs strengthen, and sustain leadership pipelines within K-12 education systems? And even though I'm the moderator, I'm actually going to jump in and kick off part of my thinking about this, because I went to Howard's Educational Leadership Policy Studies program. When I came into the program, one of the things that I immediately felt was the level of commitment that my professors had, like, to my success, but really my success being the liaison between all of the successes of other people that'll come behind me, all of the children that I serve and their success. And it was such a memorable experience that even after I graduated, right, and had a degree, still to be in community. And I really strongly believe that HBCU community, both Howards, and then, as I say, all of our cousins, across the nation, right? Because we all cousins. We might have different letters and numbers, but we all cousins, right? And through Howard's program and through that relationship, and again, that responsibility that my professors had in me, it allowed me to create networks and opportunities with all my cousins in all the other places, whether they be in schools or whether they be in higher ed. And that's just something that no one can ever take away from me, right? And the confidence that it gave me to jump out and to really take what I do as a principal that much more, I don't want to say that much more serious, but that much more to heart. right? And then the development of other people, other teachers, leaders, and all those people who want to aspire to leadership within specifically the K-12 system. So again, the question is, how can HBCUs strengthen and sustain leadership pipelines within K-12 education systems? And I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Dr. Hutchings.
Well, first off, I want to say this. HBCUs, we've always been strong producers of educators. A lot of folks, they talk about, HBCUs need to produce more. We started, we are who produced the original Black educators in America. And matter of fact, Minor Building was one of the first in the DMV to have Black teachers and educating them. So I just wanted to make that point. But the step that I feel we need to take is being really intentional around leadership development early. A lot of times we wait until somebody decides they want to pursue administration, and then we say, hey, go get a master's in ed leadership or education administration and supervision, right? We really need to start early, and that means embedding leadership identity development in undergraduate courses, making sure that students have exposure to school and district leadership roles, like early on of what they could do, because some people don't understand the possibilities going in, and making sure that the real world problem solving is tied to K-12 systems. Anything that is happening across America right now is going to be resolved through somebody who's going through a K-12 system. I truly believe it's the foundation of any and everything that we do. Secondly, I want to talk about formalizing partnerships with districts. I think we do a really good job of that here at Howard, where we have leadership residencies and internships. We have principals and superintendents that have shadowing opportunities. We got the Urban Supes Academy. We got the Superintendent's Academy that we have partners that we work with. So these are ways to familiarize partnerships. And then the final thing I want to mention is just around HBCU staying connected, right, to like their graduates. Like when folks graduate, we have to make sure that there's ongoing leadership coaching and alumni networks, especially for, our leaders of color. It is difficult out there in this world, especially if you're looking at the superintendent level. Less than 4% across America are Black superintendents. And when you talk about Black women superintendents, we're talking about 1.5%, right? So it's very minimal. So we have to ensure that we are still providing those networks and those opportunities to make sure they have somebody to lean on, somebody to boost them up, somebody to pick them up when they fall, so that they can continue to be successful.
So if I can just jump in and build off of spinning the block to what Dr. Wilkerson started with her personal experiences and being connected to an HBCU, I will say that having only having been educated at PWI institutions and having worked at a PWI before I transitioned to this position, the thing to me that sets HBCUs apart are our approaches that are deeply embedded in our commitment to collectivism and belief in Black people, right?
Yep.
And our unapologetic, unwavering commitment and belief in Black people and in Black greatness, right? I don't want to say Black excellence in the sort of rhetorical elitist sense, but in a deep-seated sense in of when them Black folks took a step off the boat, they were Black excellence, right?
Mm.
So I think one of the things, or just a couple of the things that I think we do well and can always improve upon is centering culturally responsive and equity-driven leadership development in our
Yes.
programs. I think to Dr. Hutchings' point about we do, I think collectively K through 12 education and educational leadership preparation programs nationally need to transition from thinking that leadership starts once you get a master's in leadership or a credential to be a school building or school district leader. We do have to start because leadership starts in the classroom, right?
Right.
And so I think that we have to start preparing. One thing HBCUs do well is preparing leaders to navigate and disrupt inequitable systems and not just manage schools. I would say that's what sets us apart. It's not a tagline for us. Equity is a lifeline for many Black and Brown communities,
Mhm.
right? And if we do not have leaders who are willing to interrupt the pathologies of white supremacy and racism in school districts, children are going to continue to perform below, right? And I say below in air quotes because in this country, we talk about white performance on these standardized tests like they're the bar. And they ain't, because white kids ain't killing it either. If we really wanted to use a metric, we would be talking about the Asian demographic, right? And they're immigrants. So that's the gag. But I also think that we tend to institutionalize leadership identity development. And what I mean when I say that is we create structured opportunities for reflection and self identity work to help students understand that being a moral, ethical, social justice leader, that's not like the add-on. Those aren't the croutons on your salad. That's actually the basis of your framework for leadership. So those are just some things that I think
Preach.
HBCUs can and already do to strengthen and sustain leadership pipelines within K through 12 education.
And I would plus one to everything here. One of the things I want to add, though, anytime I'm having a conversation about leadership pipelines, I always think about strong teacher pipelines.
Mhm.
You can't get to strong leadership pipelines without strong teacher pipelines. And when we think about the charge of HBCUs, if we go back to the normal school movement post Reconstruction and really thinking about the charge that HBCUs had, even before there was a such thing or a distinction as an HBCU, Black people were educating as a liberatory tool, as a way to emancipate, as a way to get people free. Those trends we see persisted. And when we think about Brown versus Board, we hear this conversation often around like, was it good? Was it not good? I think it did some things that it was supposed to do, and in some cases it didn't. Specifically, the purpose of Brown was supposed to give equal access to resources, not to integrate Black people into white schools. But when we think about these teacher pipelines, I did an op-ed a while ago that said that right now there are 3.2 million public school teachers in America. The NCES predicts that by 2030 there will be 3 million public school teachers in America. Of those teachers, only about 180,000 of those teachers are Black teachers, 50% of them educated at historically Black colleges and universities. If that trend persists, we will only see about 165,000 Black teachers, which is a lot. When you think about this comparative notion of if each of those teachers are responsible for 30 students, how many people are they actually impacting day to day?
Yeah.
Because we don't have strong teacher pipelines right now, and there is this teacher pipeline crisis, what we are starting to see is that there is a weaker leadership crisis, specifically as it relates to Black people.
Mm.
I was reading a study that was done a while back, and what it said was there are equally at PWIs the same amount of Black students going into teacher preparation than white students going into teacher preparation at the beginning of their academic careers. By the time they get to their junior years, only 7% of those Black students persist in those teacher preparation programs
Mm.
for many things, many barriers that come up. But when I hear the term pipeline often, a couple things that I think about from a systemic perspective in this crisis that we've identified it as is who defined that pipeline in the first place?
Yes.
Who actually defined that pipeline and what is that actual pipeline? And I think we have to move away from the notion, specifically with the teacher pipeline, in thinking through the fact that that framing is not neutral at all. It is not neutral at all. There are sets of people who have created this narrative around what it actually is and how leadership persists. And so when I think about these pipelines, specifically as it relates to leadership, one thing that I think, in addition to everything that everyone else has said, in my training, I got my doctorate from the University of Central Florida. My training for leadership, though, started at Bethune-Cookman University. And in some cases, I would say it started before that. But what was very interesting about that time is they were not training me to go into school leadership. What they were giving me were the skills to actually be a strong leader. And so when I think about frameworks and things like that, one thing that we can also do in addition to some of the more technical pieces that we actually get through our prep programs, whatever they are, is thinking about like how do we build liberatory leadership pipelines through the networks that we actually have and how we are functioning with people, right? Outside of just our basic programs, are we creating fellowships for HBCU students? Because if we're being honest, most of the time, fellowships that are geared towards literacy are happening at PWIs. our students do not always get the opportunity to actually engage in racial literacy in that way, and community engaged leadership with networks of other people, and navigate policy and disruption in a way where they can go and sit in a board meeting, sit in a hearing, and actually impact change and dismantle systems in that way. So, in addition to all the technical pieces, I will say bridging the gap between the teacher pipeline and the leadership pipeline, but going even a step further and creating these liberatory leadership pipelines as well.
Wow, it's powerful. You all offered some really poignant things to think about. One of the themes that I heard consistently was really this commitment to developing our teachers and the commitment to the relationships that we have and establish as we move through into our entry points, whether they be teachers, whether they might be leaders, to our exit points, if you will, right? Whatever we're aspiring to in our own leadership journeys. And I also was thinking a lot about something you guys all touched upon, which is really how are we challenging personally and collectively challenging those inherent systemic barriers that are part of when we talk about strengthening, right? It's hard for us to talk about what's working without also addressing what's not working. Right. And so I kept hearing a lot of things about the barriers, which really leads in nicely to our next question, which is what systemic barriers limit the development of future educational leaders, and how can they be addressed? And if I may, again, taking first stab at the question, and speaking from a school leadership position, I always challenge my peers, as I call them, my principals, right? My inner group, challenging us to say, now we all work in districts, right? And I say school districts are like churches. Like if you stay anywhere long enough, you're gonna find something that don't work, right? But if you're committed to the community that you're serving, then you as a principal have to really protect your position and who you stand for and who you're there for, right? And so there are a lot of ways, quite frankly, as principals, that we have levels of autonomy that I would even challenge to say, and maybe Dr. Hutchings, having been a former superintendent, can contribute. I personally feel like I have a lot more autonomy in my current position to do on the ground frontline changes, to protect my teachers' time, to develop them, to coach my aspiring teacher leaders, and also to differentiate and to say very clearly that, and one of you said it, leadership does start in the classroom. So this is not just about you having a title change or a promotion change, or you going from, an instructional coach to an AP to a principal to an instructional soup to a chief to a soup, right? A lot of people follow that pretty linear pipeline, but there's so much leadership that happens behind closed doors. And I feel like as a principal, I can protect that liberatory pathway. I can establish rituals and routines and protocols. I can find the loophole on behalf of my students and my staff, not going against the policy, but I can always find the loophole to make sure we're not replicating institutes of injustice and harm either, right? And so when I think about all the barriers that we could talk about from, whatever entry point we want to start with, whether it is Africana, whether it's 1619, whether it's 1954, right? There's different pivotal years that we can pick as our entry points, and we can talk about what worked and what doesn't. But at the same time, in all of those things, we have always had our own power, right? We have always protected our own. And as a school principal, I take very seriously my ability to protect my own, right? So that my teachers can feel like they can take a risk, they can take a chance, they can talk about liberation, they can talk about culture responsive. We can say Black with confidence and not feel like we are like slighting anyone else. We can talk about all of those things. And it's my responsibility as a principal to make sure that those conversations are happening. So as I pass the mic back to the panel, again, what systemic, I want to say systematic, but both and, what systemic barriers, right? And I say systematic because some things might be systemic, but then we put systems in place to keep it going. So what systemic barriers, right, limit the development of our future educational leaders, and how can we address them?
Can I jump in real quick? Because I want to start from the system. Part of my background is having served as a recruiter in New York City public schools. And one of the things that I know to be true is there are systems built into this hierarchy of academe that prevent students from accessing education. A quick example and thought that comes to mind was a particular university that if you wanted, as you know, just like you wanted to become a teacher, you have to do student teaching, right? Well, if I started my career off in, I don't know, I got a degree in criminology, but I've now decided that I wanted to switch. I have to go earn a master's degree. And a part of that process is completing an internship. Well, I work a full-time job now and I'm grown, right? I have a
Mhm.
family, or I just need to take care of myself. You could not graduate. The New York State Department of Education indicated that you had to have a 240-hour internship. That meant that you would have to leave your job because in New York, unless you, even if you were working in a school building, let's say you were a para, you could not get paid while
Yep,
doing your internship.
that's right.
That is an example, just one example of a systemic. I'm thinking, is it systematic or it could be both, right? Because then there were other
Yep.
layers of things that would be put on top of that. I think that those are some of the challenges. To Dr. Pringle's point about how many Black students were starting and were on par with their colleagues, one of the reasons why is still in 2026, Black folk, Black and brown folk, and Black folks specifically are still the first in their families to do things.
Yep.
And by your junior year, unless you're working in DCPS that happens to pay teachers very well, okay?
Mhm.
Everybody can't come work in DCPS, but most school teachers do not make livable wages, right?
Yep.
Not when you're looking at the realities of how much rent costs. And again, DC, New York, large urban districts, you make how much a year you think you're going to be able to pay somebody's rent? Right? So it's not sustainable. So they go into other fields, like into business, so that they can generate, or they become lawyers, or now, they doing Bitcoin, right? So that they can generate income to lift their families out of poverty. So I think that one way that we can start is by examining the systems that are barriers external to our internal barriers that we create, right? And then we can adjust barriers based off of that.
So true. I want to add that access to opportunity is another systemic barrier because like who gets leadership roles, like who's seen as ready. A lot of times they overlook folks of color, and they say they're not ready yet, you need to do. I was told that my whole career. If I'd have listened, I probably wouldn't have been a superintendent at 35 years old, right? And I sent them all letters and cards when I became one at 35. But another piece, and I really did, another piece is, the implicit biases, right, in the hiring practices and promotion systems. And then we're also lacking sponsorship, right? When there are limited numbers of folks, Black people in these leadership roles, you don't always have somebody who's going to be able to say your name when you're not in a room. So there's a lack of sponsorship, and you got other folks, they'll just bring up names because really it's by word of mouth. It's not how good you are, it's not how wonderful your resume looks sometimes. It's about who says your name. That's how a door gets open for you. I'm sorry, that's just how it is, right? So if we're already limited, that's a barrier in itself. And then I do want to say this final thing is around we can't ignore the fact that organizational culture, there are environments that are not inclusive. They can, push, I think, talented Black leaders out before they even reach positions of influence because they're not welcoming. I mean, they don't see you. You don't feel heard. You don't feel comfortable. You don't feel like people are in your best interest or in people who look like you's best interest. So the organizational culture, it prevents folks from being able to actually reach their fullest potential. And Dr. Wilson, you said this earlier, being a principal is going to be your most autonomous leadership role that you will have. I didn't know that. I was thinking when I become a superintendent, I'm gonna have all autonomy. No, you don't. When you become a superintendent, you report to a board and you have a community and you have staff and you can make any decision you want to make. You really can. But guess what? It won't last long. You won't be there. You won't be able to get another contract if you operate that way. So you don't have a lot of autonomy. As principal, don't be a principal like me where I used to just do stuff and say, I didn't know I couldn't do it, right? To the superintendent. But you do have the most autonomy, seriously, in that role.
I would say something that I think about when I think about systemic barriers specifically is that they exist at multiple inflection points in the leadership process, if you will. I think about systemic barriers for entry, systemic barriers for staying, and systemic barriers for thriving. I would love to say that when I left K-12, I left K-12 because I was just ready and it was the thing to do.
Hmm.
I always knew that at some point I would transition into higher education. I thought I would have been a retired superintendent when I transitioned into higher education. What actually happened is in what was supposed to be my thriving space, I was in a space with a leader who ultimately pushed me out.
Mm.
And because of that, I think I landed where I needed to, and that was God saying, "Hey, I'm gonna prepare you for this next thing." But it was because in the space where I was supposed to be mentored and taught, I was working with a leader who honestly could not take me. They wanted me to box myself in. They wanted me to be in a space where I only march to the beat of their drum, and that's just not who I am as a person. And so when I think about these different inflection points, while my inflection point was the space that I was supposed to be thriving, there are individuals who experience these systemic barriers, if not at all of those inflection points or some of them. And I think one of these first things when we think about entry specifically is what are some of the access gaps that we see? In some cases, those are leadership prep programs. In some cases, those are internal district programs. In some cases, those are internal alternative programs for training and leadership. But where is the access gap there and who gets access to that leadership development? And not only who gets access to that leadership development, who gets access to leadership development that is equitable and is contextual to the environment in which they are serving and leading. I think about my time when I was getting my doctorate at the University of Central Florida. I was in a cohort of 12 people. There were three black people. I was the only black male in that cohort. At the time, I was 26 years old. My perception of the world was just very different than what it is now. And I said that to say the way I was being trained was all these technical skills. I was not learning how to dismantle systems. I was not learning how to interrupt systematic oppression. I was not learning how to vouch for the communities that I would be serving in, which are primarily Black communities. I did a really, 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 really good job at meeting the competencies that were outlined in that alignment document that the state of Florida said we had to say to get our certification. But in addition to that, all of those other skills I had to get, and some of those skills came with much battle that I had to go through when I actually got into the space that I was in. The other thing that I would say too is some of the financial barriers that actually arise as a result of some of the systemic barriers that we see. I tell people all the time, specifically people that look like me, if you are going to school to get a degree, specifically a terminal degree, you should not be paying for that degree. When we think about economic and social mobility and how we've been able to come through the ranks, and some individuals are in places now where they are able to, set their families up a certain way. But also when we think about a wealth gap, when we think about economic and social mobility, right now, when Black people are born, white people in this country are three times ahead of us as it relates to wealth. And so we don't want to send people into debt to the point that they get into the leadership position. They can't even enjoy it and thrive because all they're worrying about is how they're going to pay this debt back. And then we continue to set other people up to do that. So that becomes a barrier in thriving. And then the last thing I would say is mentorship. To me, mentorship can be a good thing or a bad thing. What I have learned about mentorship is there are some individuals that are meant to be mentors, and there are some individuals that are meant to be advisors. In some cases, I am meant to be mentored. In some cases, I am meant to be advised. One of the hardest kind of heartbreak that I think an individual can have when you are ascending in a leadership position is having identified somebody as a mentor and they don't show up or come through in the way that you would have seen them show up or come through. And what that is the whole time they've actually been an advisor. And so when we think about that, I think that's another way to start to proposition and set us up to understand everybody that looks like you is not a mentor. And that is absolutely okay. Who are your advisors and who are the people that are mentoring you and asking you about your personal relationships, your family? How is your dog doing? Those things matter. And I think sometimes in this conversation, we leave out those soft skills that actually push people. It is my mentors who were able to push me past some of these systemic barriers that we actually see in the field.
Wow, this was dope. And we only have 9 minutes left in our discussion. So I am going to move us to the last question, and then offer an opportunity for some final thoughts. There are so many different things that I want to respond to, react to, contribute to, but I'm gonna monitor my airtime.
Okay, can I interrupt for a second? Because
Please,
I gotta move where the spirit moves me. I
please.
need to say this, Dr. Pringle. I want to say that I feel deeply, and I just want to extend, in the spirit of collectivism, uh, a balm to repair the harm that you experienced by another Black person. And I teach students that not all skin folk are kinfolk. And I also tell them, I almost, instead of wearing this one, I almost wore my Afeni Shakur shirt that says, or is Afeni Ashada, that says, no one will give you the education you need to overthrow them. So question everyone, including what I teach you. And I think it's imperative that we got to talk about that. One thing I think HBCUs do is, if we're doing our work correctly, we are not creating mini me's. My goal is never to replicate a Shannon Waite. First and foremost, no one else could ever. Okay. But besides that, that's not my goal. My goal is to pull out the genius that is already embedded in you ancestrally, right? That's what we do here. So I just had to say that because it was on my spirit. Sorry, Doctor.
And as African people, wherever we are in the world, we are African people. One thing we understand is that hey, that's how you know I'm at work leading the school, right? You gonna hear that bell. That's confirmation and evidence. But one thing that's gonna happen for sure as African people, wherever we are in the world, is we're gonna lead by that heart, and we're gonna listen to that spirit, and we're gonna move with that action, right? Because whoever it is that needed to know, one, right, you have to trust who you are and how you show up. And we also, and this is probably more of the barrier, but we just going to transition us to the next question though, about like the mentoring and things. But a lot of us, meaning us Africans where we are in the world, have adopted, right, the whiteness mindset and the things of thinking and being, the neoliberalism, the meta-liberalism, all of those things, because to your point, Dr. Pringle, you were able to test very well, do very well, meet the metrics very well, right? So whiteness is like, oh, he's that one exceptional. He good, right? And sometimes we embrace it because sometimes it feels good being the one. But you have to remember, it ain't about you, right? It ain't about you, it's about us. But we still know we have to perform and do different things. And so we continue to come into contact with overwhelmingly more of us that love us, but the ones that show up and prioritize their whiteness and their assimilation and their way of being that's anti to us, even though they got melanin, that thing leaves a sting, right? And we have to work hard to not be led by the result of that traumatic event, right? So that way we can continue to do the collective work to liberate us. You know what I'm saying? So no, that was good. That was good. So the last question, and thinking about that collectivism and in that partnership and who we need to do this liberatory work, what ways can cross-sector partnerships who are the people we want to be in partnership with, right? To enhance our leadership development and our capacity building outcomes. So who are the people? Who is the we?
Who are the people?
Who are the different we's that we need, right, to move in our fullness of power? So that way we are clearing paths for those who will never know, right, to operate in their fullness, in their greatness. And we are down to 4 minutes, and that's a lot, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna let the Spirit lead us, but we got 4 minutes to do it.
I'll be quick. I mean, no one institution can build a leadership pipeline alone. I mean, period, right? Because it takes aligned partnerships. I think to move from preparation to real power to impact. I mean, that's going to require that. And HBCUs, I think we provide the leadership prep. We provide like the cultural grounding. Like I know when I was at Hampton, I left Hampton knowing who I was as a Black person, right? And then I transferred to ODU, which was a PWI, right? So I came in there like, what? I dare you to say something to me, right? And then I think school districts, we provide real world application. And then the not-for-profit and the organizations, they're going to provide the innovation and the coaching and the resources. So when you bring all of that together, you're going to see those robust leadership pathways that will allow for the fellowships and the residencies and the executive coaching and the emerging leaders programs and like the data informed leadership development. All of that is going to occur when you bring those entities together.
I just say ditto to everything that he said, and I would say that I am August 13th of 2026. I will be officially 5 years ago old when I started to have my HBCU experience, and I got free from thinking that I was crazy from some of the experiences and got a chance to breathe from having to navigate microaggressions and macro assaults. And so I would just encourage us to continue to have a collective spirit to push forward to do this good work.
Yeah, and I would say when I think about these partnerships specifically in capacity building, if you will, how are we partnering with school districts? How are we partnering with philanthropic entities as well? Because we need
Mhm.
funds. How are we partnering with policymakers also, which I think is a piece that's typically left out of the conversation because our profession innately is so pragmatic. But what are the policy decisions that are impacting, and how are we coming to the table to help to have those conversations about how do we redesign certification pathways? How do we remove some of these barriers that we talked about? But I think in reimagining and really thinking about the charge that we have, something that just comes to mind very simply for me is we are a living pipeline. We are a living and breathing pipeline with centuries of HBCU students who have gone through these pipelines who are educators. And how do we intentionally bring those people back to feed them into the pipeline so that we all are collectively continuing to, systemically track where our students are, bring them back into the pipeline, mentoring, hosting, sponsoring future leaders. So how are we using our people to sustain our pipeline?
Mhm.
That was powerful. That was powerful. And with that closing part, I just leave us with the term Jegna. Jegna ship, being a Jegna, a Jegnee, being part of a community where it goes beyond the mentor, it goes beyond the
Mhm.
consultant, it goes beyond the advisor. It goes to a point where this is a reciprocal learning, building, loving relationship that we establish. And I am not just invested in your immediate career pipeline goal, right? Whether it might be the next quote step up, or maybe I'm supporting you taking a step back, right? And going quote back into the classroom. Maybe I'm supporting your ability to say, you know what, I need a break. I need to go somewhere and listen and learn so that I can be better and come back full. But a Jegna, it is our Africana term for how we are truly investing in each other holistically, in our humanity, in our Africanness, our spirituality, our intellectual and cognitive development, and a way of knowing where I understand that while you might not have to call on me for every particular thing, there might be another person you call on for a thing. I am still here with you through your journey. Whichever direction, spiral, most likely, right? Crazy loop. We've all seen the meme thing where, leadership journey is never a straight line. It's got a whole lot of things in it and a lot more erasure marks,
Yeah.
right? But as your Jegna, I am here in community, in fullness of your humanity with you. And with that, that was my final word. I'm going to give each one of you maybe 15 seconds to give us your final closing thought, the thing you want to leave with the people, with the community. And again, we are talking to those who we see, those who we don't see, those who are here, those who are not. We are talking to our ancestral spiritual beings, those that are going to come back, right? Because we are always looking forward as a means of continuing the cycle by pulling from what is within us, not even really behind us. So closing words. And then with that, the last closing word will be the last voice that they hear.
I'll start. If we're serious about moving from, pipeline to power, we have to align preparation, opportunity, and support. HBCUs, we're already doing the preparation. Now systems must match that with access, with investment, with intentional pathways to leadership, and then that's how we're going to really see this next generation of leaders thrive.
I will say that if we are going to move in the spirit of collectivism, specifically in education, thinking about leadership, we have to return the spirit of Ubuntu, right? I am because we are. And who better positioned to do that than HBCUs?
That's right.
I would say, and I just love these conversations because I get to study and research and talk about HBCUs often, but we have always been a blueprint for developing leaders, not just leaders, but leaders who serve with gratitude, who lead, and who are able to transform not just communities, but societies. We've been able to establish intellects and build politicians and strong teachers and teacher leaders. But if we are serious about continuing to move a thriving pipeline to power, we have to stop asking the question, not us here, but people have to stop asking the question, are HBCUs actually ready to do this work, and start investing in them, because we are central drivers of the work. If we know that we are the producers of educators, so many educators, we have to be able to invest in that work. And because when we do, we don't just change who leads schools, who leads communities. What we ultimately do is change what this leadership looks like for generations to come, in the legacy and the spirit of HBCUs that has always been present.
Mm.
And with that, we thank you all. Go in power.
Amen and ashe.
Ashe.
Okay, it looks like we're done recording. All right, cool. It was great being in community with
For
y'all.
sure, for sure, for
I
sure.
still see it saying recording on air.
Us? Oh, it stopped saying that on my. Oh.
There we go.